Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Braverman.
And I'm Ellen Selm,
Welcome to our podcast, Stories from the Earth.
where we explore humankind's relationship and connection with the natural world.
We'd like to take a quick moment to invite our listeners to consider supporting us through a humble little donation. If you go to our Anchor page and click the support button, there are options to donate $1, $5, or $10. The donations will go towards helping us with future projects, such as launching of our herbal education curriculum we have dubbed the People's Herb School, as well as funding to help us take the show on the road and do some on-site reviews and interviews at herb farms and schools and other interesting places relevant to our podcast. You can also leave us a review through Apple Podcasts.
Today we are thrilled to talk with local storyteller, naturalist, and herbalist Doug Elliott. He's the author of several books, including Wild Roots, A Forager's Guide to the Wild Edible and Medicinal Roots, Tubers, Corms, and Rhizomes, and also has produced a CD titled Crawdads, Doodlebugs and Creasy Greens, Song Stories and Lore Celebrating the Natural World. Doug has lectured and performed at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, and conducted workshops for the Smithsonian Institution. He's led ranger training sessions for the National Park Service and guided people on wilderness experiences down East Maine to the Florida Everglades. He was also named harmonica champion at the Fiddler's Grove Festival in Union Grove, North Carolina. So quite the jack of all trades, I would say.
Need a little.
Random harmonica solos are encouraged.
I gotta say, the Museum of Natural History is my favorite museum. I grew up in New York, and we go see the dinosaurs all the time. So awesome that you got to lecture there and perform. So we want to welcome you. You have quite the traveling and foraging history, and of course, we learned from your bio on your website that you started down this path as a child.
Let's see. I should mention I have Parkinson's disease. When I get excited, like talking about my favorite interest, I just start bouncing and shaking. So you see me bouncing and shaking, I'm having a good time. So I was raised in Maryland on an estuary of the Chesapeake, sort of where the salt water turned to fresh water, and so because of that, we had rockfish and bluefish coming in sometimes in the fall of the year, but there's also pickerel and yellow perch. And there were swamps, and there were fish, and there were crabs, and there were boats. So it was a wonderful place to grow up. And I just was one of those nature kids that just brought home every critter I could find, in different forms and different ways. My dad used to say, "That boy knows what's under every rock between here and town." I never liked him saying that because I didn't know it was under every rock, but I knew it was under a lot of them.
Now, for folks like us who don't think it's such a hard gap to conceive bridging naturalism, herbalism, storytelling, it seems synonymous to us in a way, hence the theme of the podcast. But can you tell us in your own words a bit about how these different passions of yours kind of all became interwoven into the work that you do today?
I think of that famous quote by Mary Oliver, where she says, "Instructions for living a life is pay attention, be astounded, tell about it." That's kind of what I do. There's this marvelous miracle of creation that's going on all around us all the time. I just go out there and get slack-jawed about something, and then try to research it and figure out what the story is behind whatever I'm seeing. I often say my stories begin with an incident, an encounter, a problem, or a question. Like I'll go out and I'll see something, and then I'll try to figure out what that was, and then I'll talk to anyone I can about it. And often that's where the stories come from.
So they kind of build and evolve even over time in a way.
Right, and I have all these questions on my back burner that I just save for. I might see a vulture eating something and talk to some old timer. What about these buzzards? What do you think about them? And I talk to a Native American. What about it? Buzzard is a medicine animal? Oh my goodness, And then talk to somebody else. Yeah, I got puked on by a buzzard one time. Next thing you know, I've got this whole story. Some people say my storytelling is what they call string of pearls storytelling, where these little incidents come together and you kind of pick the pearls and you kind of try to arrange them in a nice order. Well, you can pull a pearl out now and then. We'll probably be doing that here and there sometime.
Yeah, it's like you're a story collector.
Well, that's true. I always figure a good storyteller really listens well.
So what sort of formal training or schooling in any of your areas of interest and work have you had, or if any? And if it has been largely self-taught, self-made, can you please share the process as well for inspiration to us and our listeners?
Sometimes self-taught seems a little bit conceited. It's like really, it's. I mean, well, I was just a nature kid. I figured I'd go study biology. Well, I went to study biology in college, and they gave me chemistry and math, and that was really rough. And so I had to change degrees, and eventually I studied art, and that was perfect because it enforced a discipline that I might not have had. And so I've been able to illustrate all my books and CD covers and things like that.
Oh.
So that worked out well. And art, of course, doesn't inhibit you from anything. So that worked out well.
What role and importance do you feel that storytelling has? Not even just like because it's been your line of work, but like culturally and for humanity and for our relationships with nature in the grand scheme.
Well, stories is how we make sense of a lot of what's going on in life. I ask you what you did today, and you'll tell me a story. You'll tell me a narrative, and that's basically how we make sense of our life. And there's places in our brain that are hooked for stories. You can deliver information to somebody, and it's one thing, but you tell a story, they really will stick.
I find it's like easier to learn, even just like if somebody tells me a string of facts, I'm kind of not gonna, it's gonna go everywhere. But if you can connect it up with a story, even like a partial story about something, then you can really remember it and grasp it. So.
Absolutely. I remember hearing this storyteller telling traditional African stories. And she said, well, I went on a bicycle trip one time across Uganda. I'm like, boing, my interest went right. I listened much better to that story when I heard her telling her personal story.
Makes it come alive. It's funny, I was literally right before getting on here, I was talking to my husband. We're expecting our first kid, and I've been collecting books and stories and things because that was always so important to me as a kid, to read and have stories read to me. And so I've been building this like child library, and we were having this discussion about like age appropriateness for text, and not so much in terms of like, because people don't give kids enough credit for how smart they really can be and what they can absorb, right? But my argument was just that, like, it's not so much about what information is being presented, it's how it's being presented, because, kids respond so well to story. It's like it has to be engaging. It has to be something that's going to spark wonderment. But I say that about kids, but I think it's true for adults too. It's like you get hooked in if there's something that like gets the gleam in the eye and encourages the curiosity, right?
Right. My dad was a pretty good storyteller, and my mom would tell the story about we'd do whatever activities we were doing when me and my brother were toddlers, or little kids, and they would do some activity during the day, and then he'd come home from work, and she'd tell him what we did, and then at bedtime he'd tell a story about the little boy who lived in Round Bay, and which is where it was the name of the community we lived in. And he just would tell the story, and to tell basically whatever she told him, and it was like a way of reliving it, and it was totally engaging. I tried that with my child, and that really worked really well. Just changed the name a little bit, and just made it a little different, and then I'd add things to it, and well, he went out into the garden and he dug sweet potatoes, and then along came a raccoon, and next thing and that was a great way to have a bedtime story, And I also found, like, especially you all being new parents, sometimes the kid just screaming and crying and just won't just absolutely unconsolable, and I'd say, you know what, I saw this little dog and he was chased by a pony, and just start this little narrative going, and it was amazing how that would pull him out of a tantrum. So
suddenly they're like hooked, like, wait a minute, I want to know what about this.
Yeah, if I scream, I'm not going to be able to hear the story. So, just keep that in mind. You may need that one day.
Yeah, I think I actually vaguely recall, because I'm the oldest of three, and I remember I remember one time as kids where I diffused my two younger sisters arguing by just launching into some silly made up
Right,
thing, because then it's like, well, how could you keep arguing if you're just going to be laughing at this silly story?
right, right. There you go.
Have a cat visitor. This is Eugene.
Hello, Eugene.
We have this great photograph of my little brother sitting on my dad's lap, and my dad's like he's like got this hand on his face, like exasperated because he's read my brother this story over and over again for like the millionth time, and he just like would listen, just read it again, read it again, read it again. He couldn't get enough, so it's just really, really funny. So prepare for that too, Ellen.
Yeah, yeah. I have all these CDs, and now and then one of the parents will say, "Yeah, we had to lose that CD. Couldn't find it for 2 months." Then it revives again, and the kid may be onto something else. But when something resonates, it really resonates. I always come resistant to try to tell the same story twice to a group. A lot of people say, "No, we want to hear it."
You have many options for educational workshops and programs on your website. Can you talk about these and what kinds of things you like to teach and why?
Well, I love taking people in the woods and just marveling at whatever we find. We used to call them plant walks or herb walks, but I realize there's too much other interesting things out there too. And if a snake or a bird flies by, I want to talk about that too. So I often call them woods lore walks. So we deal with whatever we're seeing and deal with some of the interactions between the plants and the animals and the insects and the birds. And that's my favorite thing to do, is take people in the woods. But I also love performing some of my favorite stories to people who are interested in what I have to offer. And sometimes I do storytelling workshops where we talk about how to initiate stories and how to develop them in your life. Those are the main things. And we do some like basketry workshops, things like that too.
There's more things in the woods than just the plants, so that makes
That's
sense.
for sure.
You might encounter a few of them.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any particularly memorable lore walk experience where you were like, oh my gosh, this one time you wouldn't believe what happened?
Sometimes I feel like nature will realize that this is important and better show off when a group comes along. Actually, yesterday we did a walk with the perennial firefly organization, and did a walk, and there was a bright yellow-bellied red ringneck snake trying to swallow a salamander right in our path where we walked, and we all got to marvel at the whole thing. And I was kind of curious to see how that snake was going to eat that big salamander. And the salamander wiggled real fast and got away, and everybody cheered. Then we got to handle that little snake. It had bright yellow belly. It was just absolutely beautiful.
I don't think I've ever seen a snake with a yellow belly. Usually the black ones, and it's like the common.
Right. This is a little bitty snake. It was only about a foot long.
I'm trying to eat a salmon. Was the salamander like much bigger than it?
No,
It
would have been quite a meal for that snake. It had been able to swallow it, but it wasn't like huge, Oh, let's see what else. Oh, I mean, did a walk last fall, and I was planning on doing some stories about snakes afterwards, and a big black rat snake just walked was crawling right across our path when we walked along. So we got to mess with the snake, and that was great fun. One time, my family and I were down in Costa Rica. We were hiking into a desert, into a jungle lodge, and there with a group and with a guide, and there was a big boa constrictor just stretched right across the trail.
Wow!
Now, when I was a kid, I found an unusual snake, and I brought it to the zoo. And the zoo said, "We'd love this for our collection. Here, we just got a boa constrictor off a banana boat. Would you like it?" I ran out to the car. Mommy says I can have a boa constrictor, and I take it off. It was a small one. It was about 3 feet long, and it grew to about 5 feet. And there in the path, right there in Costa Rica, was a boa constrictor, just like the one I'd had when I was a teenager. And like I said to the guy, man, can I fool with that snake? I want to. Man, it's gonna bite you, man. It's gonna bite you. I said, I'm willing. It's not poisonous. So I picked up the snake very gently, and it was a little. I was kind of holding it, and I handed it over to my son, and he held it a little bit. Then I reached for it, and my hand reaching for it made the snake feel like it was being attacked. And went wham, bit me right on the wrist, and it actually hit a couple of my veins actually there, and it still wasn't serious, but it's just all the other tourists are like, whoa, what's going on? Don't need to bite you, man, he said.
Well, the boa constrictors, do they have fangs of any kind, or no?
All snakes have teeth.
Okay.
But the venomous ones have fangs, the long fangs that inject. But boa constrictors, they had teeth. And it was big enough that it made a pretty big scratch.
I gotta say, kudos to your parents for you running up to the car and being like, "Hey, the zookeeper said I could keep the snake, and they let you do it. That's awesome."
It was awesome. My mom, they were very indulgent. They weren't naturalists or anything like that, but my mom just said, "You have to make a cage, guaranteed you cannot get out." My dad was an engineer, and we made a little heating cage.
That's cool.
And then. And so my mom, now and then, she tried to get a little domestic help, just someone to come in and help clean once, and she'd take the woman back to the utility room where the snake cage was. Just want you to know there's a snake here, and she said they'd never come back again. My dad said that snake saved me a lot of money. I could tell you one more one of these stories. I was taking a group of school teachers in Cullowhee. There was some kind of program to the education department that gives teachers like a sabbatical week with some interest. So we were on a big hike back to these falls near Cullowhee, and I found there was a little water snake came crawling along, and I picked up a little water snake, and it was probably about a foot long, a little bitty snake. And I talked to them about how sometimes these snakes are very defensive. Sometimes they'll bite. Even if it bit you, it's no big problem. And a little snake like this would hardly be enough to even hurt you at all, to even break the skin. Someone says, "Hey, look under that rock." I looked under this great big rock, and there was 11 copperheads under this rock. I said, "Oh my God, I've never seen so many copperheads in my life." They're all lined up there. It was a perfect shelter for these snakes. I'm looking at these snakes, and right then that little snake bit me, and I went, "Bah!" Where you go, Ranger Doug? You're so cool about these snakes. look at that whole lineup of vipers, man. It really made me jump. So there's a coincidence of tales from the trail.
Well, I guess probably when you had that reaction because you got startled, did you have this whole line of teachers all, ah?
Yeah, I don't know why they just watched me. Yeah, it could have been a chain reaction.
Well, of course, we would absolutely love if you could share some stories with us that the listeners can experience the fun and wonder of a master craftsman. Would you mind telling us a tale or two?
Well, since you got me on this snake story, maybe I'll just tell you one. By the time I got swallowed, well, I was out fishing in West Virginia with a couple of my buddies, and we were fishing in this clear, warm river, the Cheat River, and we caught a few smallmouth bass and some red-eye sunfish, red eyes, these little rock bass, and I was all excited about a fish dinner, so I cleaned all the fish, got them all ready, went and picked spice bush twigs. Spice bush has real flavorful twigs, so we skewered them on spice bush twigs, cooked them over a little fire. We found a few wild mushrooms, we put them on little sticks, cooked them over the fire, and we ate this wonderful fish dinner. And it was early evening on a warm summer evening. We were walking back and walking along, and there we see this big old water snake. Now, there's no poisonous water snakes up there in West Virginia, but as I said before, sometimes these water snakes are kind of defensive. They don't really like to be messed with too much. And my buddy says, "I'm going to catch that snake." he reached down, he just reached down and grabbed that snake. And the snake responded in kind, turned around and bit him on the arm. And he went, bah! And he threw the snake up in the air and it splashed down into the water and crawled off and swam off. And he swam off towards the shallows. So I just followed the snake along. And I thought, now, am I a good snake whisperer? Could I pick up the snake? It just bit my buddy. Could I pick it up in such a way it's so gentle that it doesn't disturb the snake and it won't bite me? And, you know, and again, as I say, if it did get bitten, it just a little scratch. So I wasn't really worried about that. And I was put my hand in front of the snake, just gently as I could, just trying to slide it. I wasn't shaking like this, but just gently as I could. I was going to slide it up underneath his jaw, and then just gently pick the snake up. And I got my hand. I was moving very, very slowly. My hand got right there, and next thing you know, the snake, his little tongue came out. And next thing you know, opened his mouth and started swallowing my middle finger. And it worked its way up my finger, all the way up to my knuckle, all the way up to my knuckle. And then I guess I moved just a little bit, and the snake went, oh, like whoops, opened up its mouth and let go. And and I don't think it even scratched me at all. And I realized I smelled just like a fish.
Yeah.
Because I've been cleaning all those fish. And then I was right in front of his nose. And what's a snake to do? Just started swallowing me. So that's the story about how I got swallowed by a snake. You know.
Because it's a good thing it wasn't bigger.
Yeah. Sometimes I do a little version of, I don't know if you want this, but. I'm being swallowed by a boa constrictor, a boa constrictor, a boa constrictor. I'm being swallowed by a boa constrictor, and I don't like it one bit. Oh no, it's up to my toe. Oh no, it's swallowing my toe. Oh no, it's swallowing my toe, and I don't like it one bit. Oh Jesus, up to my knees. Oh Jesus, up to my knees. Oh Jesus, up to my knees, and I don't like it one bit. Oh, fiddle, it's up to my middle. Oh, fiddle, it's up to my middle. Oh, fiddle, it's up to my middle, and I don't like it one bit. Oh, I do not jest, it's up to my chest. I do not jest, it's up to my chest. I do not jest, it's up to my chest, and I don't like it one bit. I'm being swallowed by a boa constrictor, a boa constrictor, a boa constrictor. I'm being swallowed by a boa constrictor, and I don't like it one bit. Oh, heck, it's up to my neck. Oh, heck, it's up to my neck. Oh, heck, it's up to my neck, and I don't like it one bit. Oh, dread is up to my head. Oh, dread. That's a shell sewer. So thanks, shell sewers.
Yeah.
So all right. So I found the Frank C. Brown collection of North Carolina folklore. You ever heard of that? Frank Brown traveled through the countryside of North Carolina in the early 1900s and collected 7 volumes of folklore.
Wow.
From ghost stories to place names to just all different kinds of stories. And I went through there looking for nature-related verses. And I found these various ditties. And I put them together into a little sort of song that I do. And it's what's so interesting is almost every verse has a story behind it. And sometimes I think I could just take this one song and go on for an hour telling stories, but maybe I'll give you a little taste of it.
Yeah.
I just collected these various traditional verses and put it into a little song. And actually, the first time I did it, I collected them all up, put them all together, and went down to the Fiddler's Grove Festival. And that's when I won that harmonica contest.
Nice.
I got my blue ribbon, you know. Let's see. So the chorus goes, catfish, catfish swimming upstream. Catfish, catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Oh Lord, I pull that catfish out. And so that kind of like becomes a chorus when I'm performing it. And when the younger kids in the audience, I get them to make hand movements. So catfish, catfish swimming up a stream. And then catfish, catfish, put your hands on your hips. Catfish, catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Lord, I pulled that catfish out. I said the woodpecker in a tree. I once courted a fair lady. She grew fickle and from me fled. And ever since my head's been red. You see woodpeckers? Don't they almost always have a little bit of red on their head? Now you know the story. Those women will do it to you every time. Now, you know, from there I could even go on to talking about an old mountain man, my old mentor, Theron Edwards. One time we're up in the woods, and we hear this little pick, 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 and little bits of sawdust or rotten wood were falling down. Little downy woodpecker up there. And he says, "Oh, buddy, I wouldn't take nothing from my woodpeckers." I said, "What kind of woodpeckers you got around here?" "Oh, I don't know, buddy, but I wouldn't take nothing from my woodpeckers. Them little downy jobbers like that," he says, "they'll get right they'll go right down your row of corn. They'll get in the top of them ears of corn, and they'll eat the worm right out of the top of the corn. Buddy," I say, "I wouldn't take nothing from woodpeckers." "What kind you got around here?" "Lord, we got the awful side of woodpeckers around here you ever saw. We got the redhead, we got the wood hen, we got the yellow hammer, we got the white ass nanny, we got them little downy jobbers, and twice I seen a Dominecker woodpecker." And I realized he went through the whole collection of North Carolina woodpeckers without using any of the traditional names. They maybe except downies. He called it a little downy jobber. So when he's talking about the redhead woodpecker, the redhead, he called it the redhead woodpecker. And there's also the pileated woodpecker, which he called the wood hen, because they sound a little like a hen when they call.
Yeah.
And it tastes like chicken when you cook them right, you know. And then the yellow hammer is the flicker, and the flicker is kind of a yellow bird, and has and hammers, you know. In fact, it's interesting. It's actually properly called the northern flicker now. But if you look at a state list of state birds, you look at Alabama, they don't call it a northern flicker. They call it a yellow hammer. One time I was talking to an old man. He said, "Yeah, I'm moving in with my daughter now. I'm getting older." And she had a bird feeder out there, and I went and looked in her bird book, and there wasn't a yellow hammer in there, buddy. It's a stink damn species, what it is. And I said, "No, actually, they just changed the name of that." And he says they call them flickers now. He said, "Son," I said, "I saw one the other day." He said, "Son, you made my day." And then I realized for the white ass nanny, I showed him a picture in the book, and he pointed to the hairy woodpecker, which has kind of a white back. And then the Dominecker woodpecker, you had to know chickens as well as woodpeckers to know what he's talking about. The Dominecker chicken is Dominecker is the mountain way of saying Dominique, which is one of the old breeds of chickens that are black and white, zebra stripe. And we got one woodpecker they call the red belly woodpecker, which has that. And so it just it's just amazing. And you see, I've only gotten 2 verses of the song done now, you know. Up stepped the blackbird, says to the crow, "What makes that farmer hate us so? Well, it's been the case since we've been born. It's been our trade to pull up corn." Now, a crow's a pretty big bird, but do you think a crow could pull up a whole stalk of corn? No, but what it does, it recognizes little sprouts of corn when they're first coming up out of the ground. They'll walk out there and they'll pull that little sprout up. The kernel will still be attached to it. They'll hold that sprout down and they'll twist the kernel off of it, eat that, go down the road, pull up the next one, go down the road, pull up the next one. Sometimes a flock of crows can clean out a farmer's field in one morning. Makes those farmers so mad. One time I went out to my little corn patch. I saw a couple of crows fly up out of there, and I went and I looked. I could see these crow tracks all over the dirt. And sure enough, there's my little corn sprouts laying right beside the hole they've been pulled out of. Well, the sprout was looking so succulent and juicy, I just couldn't resist. I picked it up and I tasted it, and it tasted sweet. It was sweet as sugar, and I couldn't believe it. And I realized I learned something that morning, that when a seed sprouts, that's when its nutrients peak. That's when all the starches turn back to sugars, and when all the nutrients reach their highest form. You know, you go to a Chinese restaurant, you get bean sprouts, right? Mm-hmm. You go to the health food store, you can buy alfalfa sprouts, sunflower seed sprouts. And back here in the hills and the hollers here in the mountains, a lot of those old timers were trying to make a value added product out of their corn crop. So what they do is they sprout the corn, that increase the sugars, and they chop it all up. That become malt, and the malt, they take that malt, they ferment it and run it through a still. You get a whole for a jug of corn liquor than you could for a bushel of corn. And so
And you beat the crows to it, right?
That's a value-added
If you're,
product.
if you're getting it right when it's sprouting, you're going to get it before the crows.
Right. What they would do, they'd put it in a cloth bag and just wet it and let it all sprout, and then they grind that up, you know. And so people have known about sprouting grains and seeds for centuries, but crows have known about it for even longer. Catfish swimming upstream. Catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Oh Lord, I pull that catfish out. Up step the fish drake, says to the crane, oh, when we gonna get some rain? Well, the creek's all muddy and the pond's all dry. If it weren't for crawdads, we'd all die. You know, and it's talking about a drought time, you know, and crawdads being one of the critters that can survive a drought. And you know, we had pretty good rain this year, but you know, we were around a few years back. We had that drought, didn't rain for about 6 months. And I tell you, I went fishing one day, and I caught a catfish. That catfish had 6 ticks on it, buddy. Let me tell you, that was telling you how dry it was. And windy, Lord, it was windy. We went on that windy day. I remember, I tell you, I saw our prize hen lay the same egg twice. Now, buddy, that's windy. Now you just think about it. Catfish going up the street. Oh, let's see. Where's it go from there? Let's see. I was walking on through that field. Well, a black snake bit me on the heel. Well, I whirled around and I run my best. And I bumped my head in a hornet's nest. Ow. Yeah. I was walking on down that road. Spied a terrapin and a toad. That terrapin, he began to sing, and that toad, he danced a pigeon wing. And you know what they were singing, don't you? Catfish. Catfish, where you been? Grab that catfish by the snout. Oh, Lord, I pulled that catfish out. All right. Enough foolishness to hold you for a little while.
Having grown up here in these mountains and been an outside kid a lot too, all of that's like, yeah, like I get it. And I just think of about how many people don't get that exposure from a young age. And it's like, they could hear those songs and maybe think that it's like, it's fun and quirky. You are able to have the experience when you're sort of immersed in nature. Then it's like songs and stories like that take on a whole new meaning.
You understand what goes on behind it. But that's kind of our job, is to kind of try to spread the wonder of this miracle that's all a part of, and just spread it any way we can, you know. Get
people excited to go out there and try to catch snakes and catfish.
Or at least look at them.
Yeah.
Doug, I had a question about a photograph of yours that I just saw. I saw it after we made our list of questions, so I'm inserting this in here. There's a picture of you on your website where it looks like you have what I think is a groundhog on your shoulder. And I have a story of when I was just really little. I guess there was one that lived like under our house, and I was outside 3 or 4 years old, and I was outside catching fireflies and putting them in jars, and my parents had already gone back inside with my little sisters to put them to bed, and I decided I'd get just a couple more fireflies, you know, just one more. So I go around the back of the house, and the groundhog's there. In my child mind, the only way that I visually still see it in my memory is it was like, you know, like Monty Python rabbit, like, you know, the big nasty teeth. running straight towards me. So I go running back to the house and I'm screaming. And my parents are like, oh my God, what? And I'm like, there's a creature. They're like, what? And I'm like, the creature is after me. And so the whole rest of my life, I haven't been able to live that down. And the groundhogs are forever just referred to as creatures. And so when I saw that picture of you, and I'm like, oh my God, he's got one on his back. Like, what's the story there? How did you end up with being able to contain a dog?
Well, first of all, that is the most amazing promo shot I could ever have gotten. It was just mostly my wife Yana takes care of a lot of orphaned animals, and somehow or another a little baby groundhog came her way.
Oh,
and we keep them for a while, raise them up, and then turn them loose. You know, it's sort of like you have to do with your own kids. You know, it's like they're like your own kids are like raccoons or possums. You know, you keep them when they're little, but then after they get to a certain age, they get kind of snap at you. You have to let them go. Well, it was like we gotta let this little groundhog go. You know, I said, let me see if I can get a picture of you, and I just held up those greens for the groundhog, and it looks like it's smiling, you know, and we let him go about the next day. Took him to a big kudzu patch. His name was Gudger.
Well, that explains it then, though. You had him since he was a baby, so he was going to be tolerant to a tolerant creature.
Right. They stay tame for a little while.
All I remember is my mom yelling at the groundhog for eating her garden. Like that dang groundhog.
Oh my! One of my recordings is called Groundhogology, and it starts with a dead groundhog and goes all the way through mythology and mysticism and politics, and ends up with world politics, all starting with a groundhog.
Who would have known?
I mean, Groundhog Day. You know, Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
It's the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Right. Ancient festival of the return of the light.
They move very fast, Helen. Yeah. I can see why you were scared. They're like,
and maybe you were so little you really weren't you didn't intimidate it, and actually maybe it was.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like did I just imagine, like, maybe did it just hop in my general direction and I freaked out and over imagined it, or maybe I was small enough that it was like, yeah, I could take her. Of course, the groundhog eventually moved on because then a family of skunks moved under the house. So that was always no one ever got skunked, but you could smell it sometimes in the summer coming up through the floorboards.
You know you can pick up a skunk by the tail and not get sprayed?
What?
Because they have to have their let's see if I can do this right. They have to have their tail at a right angle to their body. So if you pick them up, you've got the tails parallel. Of course, then once you got a skunk by the tail, what do you do then? Just call me. If you don't get my answer machine, I'll tell you. What you do is you just slide, just kind of toss it forward about 12 or 15 feet away. It just walks off. They're very, very cool. It's farther than the spray.
Have you done that experiment before personally?
I have a couple of times.
Wow.
You can't miss it. You have to get it first time.
Yeah.
You know, no second, no second.
I guess groundhogs and skunks don't get along if the groundhog kind of moved off and the skunks moved in.
Yeah, I wouldn't think they would.
Stinking up the joint.
Yeah.
Well, you've traveled all over, it sounds like. So surely you've collected some good travel stories.
Yeah, in my younger days, before I had a lot of money, I hitchhiked a lot, and those days everybody was thinking about gone to look for America, and I thought I want to look for America too, you know, and California dreaming on a winter's day. I was living in New England at the time, and I thought, yeah, I'd like to go to California. Well, how am I going to get there? Well, I don't really have much money for a car, so I stuck out my educated thumb and had a marvelous trip all the way across the country. And eventually went down into Mexico, went across, ran up California, and up into British Columbia. And I got picked up by a young couple who were getting ready to move into a cabin. And they said, "But we're going to be camping out for a couple of days, and we got a bunch of food here. You can stay with us if you want." And so I was hanging out with them, and the river just flowed by all the time, and kind of like they were very unconversational. I found out that she was pregnant. I said, "Boy, that must be a lot of changes back up here in the British Columbia backcountry. You're gonna have a baby." She went, "Yes." Kind of wound me right down. I was telling stories and kind of wound me down and listened to that river, and the river just kind of sang and gurgled and I looked all around me and I could see snow-capped mountains. I thought, wow, snow-capped mountains here in June. My goodness, I'd love to go up there and play in the snowfield, see what that like. So I decided one day I packed my sketch pad, packed some lunch, packed some water, started hiking up the mountain. But there weren't any marked trails. It was just basically just cutting through the brush. And so I kind of spent a good part of the day, and I got up onto this one ridge and looked up, and the snowfields were still way above me. And so I thought, well, let's see here. I looked down, I could see that valley below. I see all the snow-capped mountains all around me, and I thought, wow, well, I'll just draw some pictures here. So I pulled out my sketchbook and I started sketching. And I kind of looked, and the snowfields, the way it merged with the sky, it looked like the sky came down into the snowfields, and the snowfields kind of went up into the sky. It looked like the earth and the sky was all one. Oh man! Then I saw the trees and thought about how the trees, their roots went down into among the rocks and the ground, and forming the very network of the earth. And it was a lot to draw that day. I did a lot of sketches, and I kind of watched the shadow of the mountain kind of move across the valley, and I realized I better get down off this mountain here before I get stuck up here. I don't want to spend the night up here. And so I started back down into the spruce forest. And just as I got into the forest, all of a sudden I hear and flying up right. It was a grouse, but it wasn't like any grouse I'd ever seen. It flew up and it landed in a branch just up above, just maybe 15 feet away, and just sat there kind of looking at me going, go. I thought, well, if you're just going to sit there, I'm going to get my sketchbook out. And I took my sketchbook out and started sketching. I made a couple of quick sketches. Then it turned around on the branch, gave me another pose, got a couple of pictures, and then it flew off. And I thought to myself, wow, well, that was not like any grouse I'd ever seen before. I found out later it was called a spruce grouse. And they're sometimes called fool hens because they live in uninhabited areas, uninhabited by people, and they're kind of tame. And they're called fool hens because sometimes if you're really starving in the wilderness, you can kill one with a stick. And and I thought to myself, wow, here I am in the Canadian Rockies drawing pictures of these incredible mountains and these exotic-looking birds like I've never seen before. Holy cow, I'm a wildlife artist. I thought, wow, if someone had told me when I was trying to fail out of college from not getting through all the chemistry and math, that in 2 or 3 years I'd be in the Canadian Rockies being a wildlife artist, that would seem like the most culmination, the most amazing dream that I ever had in my life. Wow, I'm a wildlife artist. And I thought, how did I get here? Did National Geographic hire me? No, not exactly. Did I get a National Endowment for the Arts grant? No, not exactly. How did I get up here? Well, I stuck out my thumb and walked up the mountain and got there. And in some ways, that kind of affected me in a profound way. And I thought, if I really want to do something, I need to do it with clarity, with humility, with determination and passion. If I can do that, maybe I can just keep doing that. So I kind of returned home and got back and started doing more drawings and paying more attention. And I've been doing that kind of stuff for years. And a few years later, I met a Native American guy, and he asked me, he said, "Did you ever see a spruce grouse?" I said, "Yeah, I did. What's the story on them?" He says, "Well, we always think of them as a messenger bird, that when you see one, you should pay attention because often it brings an important message." And I thought to myself, yes, clarity, humility, determination, and passion. And that's how I try to live my life in this world of contradictions and conflicts and contrasts. And but there you go. You never know where you're going to get your insights.
That's very awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's a matter of being open, and then you kind of get the manifest destiny in there.
Well, Lord knows we try, don't we?
So, what inspires you most about the natural world?
I guess just the surprises, I guess. and the fact that I'm always looking for connection, ways that we can relate. That's why I got interested in plants and which ones can be useful. And I realized that there's very few that aren't useful, and that made it more interesting as time went along. Points of contact, we always say.
We like to ask this about all of our guests. What are some of your favorite books that you recommend pertaining to herbs, foraging, story, and storytelling?
Well, there's a couple of books just came out of our region. Corey Pine Shane has an herb book, and so does Juliet Blankenspore, and they're both very spending a lot of time thinking about plants, and I'm looking forward to checking them all out. For just plain nature writing, probably my favorite is Bernd Heinrich. He wrote Mind of the Raven. He wrote Bumblebee Economics. He wrote Animals in Winter. A profoundly interesting writer. Can take a subject that you would think would be drab and uninteresting and just make it interesting. And those are at least a few.
Along your journey here, has there been any particular people that have really inspired you kind of or become a mentor along your path of storytelling and naturalism?
A number of people. I often refer to my old mentor Theron. He was a mountain man from Yancey County, and he knew a lot about wild herbs, and I ended up living in a cabin right next to him for a couple of years, and we go to the woods, and he was a delight to be with, and had lots of lore and interesting information, and like he's the one that I was talking about all the woodpeckers.
Oh, nice.
And Ron Evans, Chippewa Cree friend of mine, I met through the storytelling circuit from Canada. He a lot of his philosophy has been inspiring to me, and lots of other people too.
I guess everyone you've collected little story tidbits from, in a way, have become the amalgamation.
Spent some time with Ray Hicks, the great Jacktail teller from Beach Mountain, and some of my stories are about my time with him.
Nice.
Do you have any upcoming events or educational opportunities or offering that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I'll probably be at the Firefly Gathering.
Okay.
And I'll be out at the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival in Utah later this year. But of course, if the podcast lasts longer, these dates will be passed.
I'll put the links up anyway. You can probably see if you're watching the video version, but I've got a bunch of boxes in my living room and I'm moving, so we're kind of taking a 2-month hiatus on the podcast. So
you've got a lot to do.
Yes. So this podcast may come out afterwards, depending on.
Well, you could maybe make a little, at least once you get the specific dates, you could just make an Instagram post as a teaser. Like we haven't released the episode yet.
Oh yeah.
And also, my website has a calendar on it.
Okay. Cool.
That tells you where I'm going to be.
And I'll put the links to your website and all the information. Mm-hmm. So,
like, I'll be at Earth Haven in late May. So.
Cool.
All right. Well, great to meet you all, and good luck with this project. I think it's nature and stories and all that. I live and breathe that stuff.
That's why you were the perfect guest for the theme.
Well, great. All right. Well, thanks, and see you. We'll talk later.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. All right, everyone. Well, you can find us on YouTube. You can listen to us on Anchor or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we will talk to you next time. So, bye. Bye.
Thank you.